This stakeholder update portion is just an opportunity about what the organization has been involved in, maybe information you've heard from other members of the community, just something that you'd like to share with the RAB members as a member of the community or government of the RAB. And then we'll have more detailed discussion and further presentations. With that, let me now turn to Mr. Willis for the Air Force stakeholder update.
Thank you, Tim. Can everyone hear me? traditional VOCs. And it's a follow-on to a study that's already, the field work's already been done. And like I said, the Eagles reviewed the report, and so this is kind of the next step of that. And this will include more field work as well as a risk assessment. A couple things that I didn't have on the previous slide that I just wanted to update everyone on. We are in the process of awarding a contract for a preliminary assessment, which is the first step in the circular process. It's really going back through historical records, and we're looking for non-AFFF sources of Pfas. The Pfas investigations we've done to this date have really focused on the aqueous film firefighting foam. And so now we're going back, and it's actually going to be a BRAC-wide initiative. We're awarding a contract for all the bases to go back and look for other potential sources of PFAS other than firefighting foam. Wordsmith will be one of the first installations done based on the risk rating that was done for all the BRAC bases. I was told that that potentially could start as early as December of this year. So as that progresses, I'll be able to provide you with updates on that as well. You'll notice in your handouts, and Mark briefly mentioned, Tim briefly mentioned that your handout includes an acronym list. In the slide presentation, we've just defined the acronyms that are used in the presentation, but you've got a handout that's got about 7 pages of acronyms, and it's really intended as an all-encompassing list of acronyms that we use when we talk about Wordsmith. Some of them may not have been used in years. I think some of them are probably legacy acronyms that the organizations don't exist anymore, but they're still in documents and reports. So if you're reading an old report and you run across an acronym, that list should help you. During the course of these meetings, you know, we start answering questions, we start talking about stuff that's not necessarily on the slides, so that acronym list should help you with that as well. You know, go ahead, Arnie. It's one of the first. There is nothing publicly available yet. The contract has not been awarded, is my understanding. So as soon as material is available, I will let you know.
Sounds like difficulty hearing, JD. Don't mind. Okay, so did you have a follow-on question?
And then, yeah, one last thing, in addition to the acronym list, there is a base-wide map. We'll probably review that and update it, and for the next RAB, we'll have a handout that'll include a list of all the IRP sites and the status of them. I know that's something that several RAB members have asked for, and it's in works, and so I'll have that for the next meeting. For the benefit of those that are not in attendance in person going forward, my intention is to email the handout material, presentation, and so forth to anyone that's registered for this so that they'll have it in hand to follow along. So I encourage anybody that does plan to participate in these in the future to register, because if you do, then you will have access to the material that's provided here at these meetings. And that's all I have.
Thank you very much, Stephen. And so we want to continue on through our stakeholder updates. For those who are on the line, we do have the audiovisual tech trying to make some adjustments here, so please do bear with us. Quintina, please do continue to let us know if you're not able to hear us. Let me do a quick sound check with you right now. Are you able to hear me well? Okay. Well, good. For that reason, as we proceed through our remaining stakeholder updates, let me just ask those of you, the RAB members, to come up here if you would like to make a comment, just to make sure that everyone who's taken the time to join in remotely can hear as well. So we'll start off with our community RAB members first, and I'll just call on all the community RAB members. I'll mention who's in the queue, who's on deck, who's in the batting circle, and so on.
Mark Henry, if you would start us off, then we'll go to Bill Gaines and Arnie Lurich after that. But first, we'll start with Mark Henry, just for any brief stakeholder updates you may have.
About all that's transpired on the community RAB front since the last RAB meeting is some internal meeting and discussion about various topics. Other than that, I don't really have anything to report.
Thank you very much, Mark. We'll next turn to Scott Lingo, Joe Maxwell, and if Ryan Mertz has joined us, to Ryan. Scott Lingo, any update? No? Okay, no update there. Joe Maxwell? No update right now. Okay, and let me just do a quick check-in. Do you have Ryan Mertz listed on the attendee list? M-E-R-T-Z? Okay, we'll move on to Greg Schultz, Dane Stock, and Rex Vaughn. So Greg Schultz.
Nothing.
Nothing at this time? All right, thank you, Greg. Dan Stock, would you like to share anything, sir? Okay, all right, thank you, Dan. And to Rex Vaughn.
Nothing for me this afternoon yet.
Okay, all right, thanks, Rex. And to David Wynn and Kathy Wisterbar. So David?
Yeah, one update that I would like to mention is a group of individuals within the community sat down and based some additional, what we believe are additional IRAs that I want to get noted based on the previous ESI data that was already published. And some of the areas that we'd like to be noted for record is the DRMO area. We believe that there's an additional IRA that needs to be done there based on the ESI data. Landfill 3031. Three pipes drain, you talk about a pilot study, but nothing's talked about an additional IRA, which we believe is a substantial IRA that needs to be done. And then the last one is a wastewater lagoon and seepage beds. That's again another area that we believe is pretty substantial that needs some attention here very, very shortly in the tune of an IRA. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. And to Kathy Wisterbar.
Thank you. All right, the community members, including the NOW group, have continued to meet with the MPART team, Eagle, MDHHS, and as Dave had mentioned, the NOW technical team, which has come up with some ideas and things that we wanted to submit to the RAB here. And of course, our environmental partners like National Wildlife Federation and Michigan League of Conservation Voters and Ecology Center. I had the opportunity to testify at a hearing, a United States Senate field hearing in East Lansing for the Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs related to improving interagency and intergovernmental coordination on Pfas for Michigan communities. I did that on August 1st. I wanted to just mention some of the things that I submitted for my testimony, including the new EPA reduction in lifetime health advisory for PFOA and Pfas, and how that might impact our municipal water supply in terms of the 2015 and 2016 testing of the Lake Huron municipal water system, which revealed a 4.2 parts per trillion of PFOA and PFAS combined for the sampling. They also submitted information about the visual evidence in the PFAS-laden foam that are forming on our waterways in Lake Huron, as you can see in the back by the pictures that I have displayed. I also submitted the timeline of PFAS exposure and actions at Wordsmith, which was a report that we previously submitted to the RAB, but I will include that in tonight's meeting just so that they're familiar with what was provided in my testimony. And also talking about how communities have vital information to provide, and we shouldn't be dismissed when it's presented, which is what happened when we submitted that report in the September 2021 RAB meeting. I made some requests to Senator Peters for the committee. There were I'll start with these three. We want the information portals from the U.S. Air Force to the state of Michigan, which was discussed in the hearing, to be opened so that the state of Michigan and that information can be accessed more readily. Right now, it's a closed portal. We want expanded opportunities for public input on plans, and we want, most importantly, I'm making the request to have inclusion of local leaders in the base closure team meetings, which occur, I believe, quarterly, which has been done in the past, and we would like for the local team to consider that. Actually, we requested that of one of the leaders of the Air Force Department of Defense at the hearing. Lastly, we want to request, or we are requesting that we may reestablish the former Wordsmith Air Force Base as a model or shining star for effective Pfas cleanup. And we want to have the health of those affected by this site to be monitored by the Department of Defense and getting blood tested. I'm going to submit again this information to him. Lastly, this information related to the wastewater treatment lagoons, we are attempting to present that to the local townships because they know that we believe that that is impacting those lagoons and, of course, the Clark's Marsh. So we're attempting to present that information to them so that they can be more informed about this system. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wishworth. And let's continue on now with our governmental RAB members for any stakeholder updates you may have. Let me first check in with Jesse Stunevec with USDA Forest Service. Jesse, are you able to hear me all right?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can. Yeah, thank you very much. Did you have any updates you'd like to share?
I do not. Thank you. I'll let Ben answer anything you may have.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Ben, anything that you'd like to share at the moment? Sure. Okay. Come on up.
All right, good evening, thank you. So I just learned that yesterday morning the FTO2 is back up and running. And so those new extraction wells that were put along Clark's Marsh on Forest Service land are up and running, and I heard that it's pumping 380 gallons per minute at this point. So I thought that was quite a notable feat. We are very happy to see that progress being made. And in the meantime, we've also been working with Air Force and contractors to identify, as they identify, new locations in Clark's Marsh that need to be sampled. So our specialists, biologists, botanists, we're going over every activity to make sure there's no negative impacts to the natural resources as that progresses. So right now we're looking at some new well sites and locations. So from our perspective, we're making good progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. We appreciate that. Let's now move to David Kline with the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. David.
Hello. I just first wanted to introduce myself. I'm David Kline. I manage our Superfund program at Eagle. Our normal RAB member, Beth Place, is on vacation this week, so I'm filling in for her. Eagle continues to do contractor oversight of the remedial investigation for Pfas and the interim remedial action installations. And we continue to collect split samples of samples that the Air Force is collecting, where we're collecting approximately 10% of the samples for quality assurance purposes. Eagle sent a letter to the Air Force on May 26th indicating unresolved comments that we had on the PFAS RI work plan. And we'll be working with the Air Force to get those remaining comments addressed. On June 1st, Eagle and Air Force met to discuss the PFAS RI near and east of Van Etten Creek. And so our understanding is that that work's ongoing. On June 21st and 28th, Eagle met with the Air Force to discuss the PFAS RI risk assessment work plan comments. Air Force plans to respond to our comments and then finalize the document. And we'll be following up on any unresolved comments. The biota sampling plan is under review at Eagle, and the Eagle back check will be provided next week to the Air Force. Eagle has reviewed and sent comments to the Air Force on the work plan for long-term monitoring of the legacy contaminants at the site. So that's things like volatile organic compounds outside of the PFAS RI. And then lastly, I wanted to mention that our Water Resources Division at Eagle has revised some of the water quality standards for PFAS recently. There's a revised water quality standard for PFOA and a new water quality standard for PFBS. The water quality standards for PFOS have not changed, and they're kind of the main one driving work out here. So we're not expecting these changes to have a big effect on the work out here, but we'll be reviewing what the impacts of these changes might be on the work out here, and the Air Force is looking at that as well. Okay, thanks.
David, I appreciate that. We'll move to Michael Munson with Oscoda Wordsmith Airport Authority. Michael.
Thank you, and good evening. I'm Mike Munson with the Airport Authority Board. We're pleased to report that the current business climate at the airport has experienced positive growth. Several tenants have experienced positive business growth and facilities improvement. The new airport manager has made exciting changes within the airport boundaries. These include, but not limited to, building improvements, new airport signage, and physical appearance improvements with respect to on-site landscaping. The latest FAA airport inspection gleaned a favorable comment. KOSC is one of the best appearing GA airports in the state of Michigan. We look forward to 2023 and the long-awaited $7 million taxiway resurfacing project. I can share additional information and answer questions about airport operations after the meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. And let me just check in to see if we have Eric Strayer with the Sawville Township on the line. Do we have Eric Strayer? I think not. Okay. And do we have Puneet Vij with Michigan Department of Health and Human Services?
Yes, I'm good.
Hey, Puneet, how are you doing? Thank you for joining us. Let me just see if you had any stakeholder updates you'd like to share.
Sure, so I can provide an update on round 3 residential building sampling. So in this round 3, so far 225 homes have been sampled, and the resampling is still ongoing. And I can provide more information in next month's town hall.
Okay, and Puneet, also, if you'd like to shoot an email with that update my way, then I can share with co-chairs and get that out to the group as well for folks.
Sure.
Anything else you'd like to share, Puneet?
No, I think that's only a bit of that.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much. And now we're up to Tim Cummings with Oscoda Township.
Thank you. So the first topic here is actually a presentation that Mark Henry will be making to the Oscoda Township Board about the influence of the Oscoda wastewater treatment plant discharge on Pfas. Sure, I can hear myself. Thank you. Sure, no problem. So as I was saying, he'll be making a presentation to the Oscoda Township Board about the influence of the Oscoda Township wastewater treatment plant discharge on Pfas to Clark's Marsh. And that presentation will be taking place at the next Township Board meeting on Monday, August 22nd at 7 p.m. And the next topic here is actually a matter of questions. I wasn't at the last RAB meeting, and Bill Palmer, the trustee for Oscoda Township, stepped in for me, and there were some questions about stormwater and the stormwater sewers. I wanted to know if the Air Force could address the current status on stormwater sewer usage and the Air Force's plan to slip line the main line, as well as slip line the Mission Street line. And just update us on the Air Force's plan to pay for stormwater sewer usage. Third topic here is actually regarding, once again, the wastewater treatment plant on the old Wordsmith Air Force Base. And what plans does the Air Force have for cleanup of the PFAS that was dumped below the wastewater treatment beds? And what priority is the Air Force assigning to this cleanup, and has an estimate of cost been created? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. And to Denise Bryan with District Department of Health District 2. Any? No update. All right. Well, thank you. So, RAB members, that takes us through the community and government RAB members. Any other brief updates you'd like to share before we move on? Okay. Well, so let's move on, if we could, to the RAB business portion of the agenda. We're on slide 11 and now 12. Just to note that the co-chairs have a standard practice where they meet following each RAB meeting about 2 weeks or so after the RAB meeting concludes. That will happen after this RAB meeting as well. So following the last RAB meeting, the co-chairs met, they reviewed action items. There are currently 11 action items that are either open or ongoing. And they'll meet again after tonight's RAB meeting to review those action items that are captured tonight. I may follow up with a few of y'all. Mr. Cummings, I may follow up with you because I think I heard some action items in there. I want to make sure and capture that. David Nguyen, I think I heard some from you. So after the meeting, I might get with you just to confirm that I've captured correctly what sounds to me like some possible action items. Arnie, I'll do the same thing there. But one of the things I'm doing as we continue our discussion, at least when I can get over to my computer, is to write down anything that sounds like a possible action item. I list those out, and we review them with the co-chairs and proceed from there. So again, that's kind of the process for the action items. In relation to membership, during recent discussions, the co-chairs noticed that operating procedures section 2.2.4 pertains to attendance. It indicates that any RAB member who fails to attend 3 consecutive meetings shall have their membership vacated without further action by the RAB. Ryan Mertz, a community RAB member, has not attended the last 8 RAB meetings. And so during the 25 May co-chairs meeting, the co-chairs decided that after reaching out to Ryan to see if he was able to participate, if he was unable to participate tonight, then his position would be deemed vacated in accordance with that section of the operating procedures. So that is now the case, that his position is vacated. And when the co-chairs get together after this RAB meeting, one of the items on the agenda then would be the process, how we need to proceed to fill that open position. Last item is community RAB co-chair term. So Mr. Mark Henry's term as community co-chair concludes on the 1st of September of this year. Your term, of course, as community RAB member is ongoing until September of 2023, as many of the other RAB members are. So operating procedures section 2.3.1 says the RAB community co-chair shall be selected by a majority vote of community members. The board community co-chair shall serve a 12-month term. A community co-chair may serve 2 or more terms if approved by the board community members. So the plan is that we will conduct an election at our next scheduled RAB meeting, which is 16 November 2022. And after tonight's meeting, I'll check in with you, Mark, to check your interest in continuing to serve in this role. Also, all the other community RAB members, I will reach out to you to see if you are interested in serving in that capacity. And then we'll have a simple voting process at the 16 November RAB meeting. So that's kind of the update there. Let me just check in first with our co-chairs. Anything that you'd like to add to that update? Any further RAB business items that you would like to address? Okay. Mark?
I don't really have anything either, other than I would like to see some additional RAB members join the team, community members join the team, and hoping to reach out to a couple of different groups to try to recruit additional members.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. Well, good. Let's see. So that takes us through some of the introductory portions of the agenda. Thanks for your patience again. We're now to the presentation. We have Paula Bond with Aerostar SES to brief us on the remedial investigation and interim remedial action update. So Paula, I will hand this over your way and let you take over.
All right, I'm just a little too short for this. There we go. All right, thanks everybody for joining us this evening. We have a lot of information to share with the folks. We'll just go ahead and get kicked off here. Hopefully I can get started. The first slide that we have up, and we showed this slide at the last RAB meeting, and this slide is really intended just to give everybody in the meeting an overview of the circular process and the nomenclature that we use when we talk about the activities that are taking place at Wordsmith. And I'm not going to read through all of these, but I just want to make sure everyone kind of understands the process that we're following at Wordsmith for the cleanup and the investigation. Everything starts out with the site identification and initial sampling, and that correlates in the circular process to the preliminary assessment like Steve was talking about earlier, to a site inspection for those initial investigations. And then they roll into additional investigation and site cleanup, and then eventually long-term management at the end. One thing that I do want to point out, and I'm going to try to do this, we are currently in the remedial investigation phase at Wordsmith, and I think most folks are familiar with that. One thing that I do want to point out is the work that we're doing in the remedial investigation is driven by the documents that we prepare, our planning documents for that investigation, and what we call the UFP QAP, which you guys have heard, and that's in your acronym list, or the work plan. Those two are interchangeable. So when we mention, sometimes we may say work plan, sometimes we say the UFP QAP, but that's the same document, and that's the document that identifies the processes and the procedures that we use, that we follow in the remedial investigation. And I got a question on that earlier, so I just want to make sure that was clear for everybody. But we are in the RI phase of the investigation currently. Next slide, please. So the next slide is also just kind of a summary of the Pfas RI progress here at Wordsmith. We show this slide also in our RAB meetings every time, so you can kind of get an idea of where we are. The colors in the graphic relate to whether that task is complete, it's ongoing, or it's to be started. And as you can see here for the RI scoping was completed. The UFP QAP or work plan has been completed. We are still in the process of finalizing the risk assessment work plan that Dave Kline mentioned just a little bit ago. We are in the field data collection process right now, as most of you are aware. And then, of course, all of that data will feed into the RI report in the end. As far as the IRAs or interim remedial actions, that progress at Wordsmith, again, the colors mean the same thing, complete or ongoing or to be started. We have completed the scoping, our proposed plans are complete, the interim records of decision for both FTO2 and Ken Ratliff Park and Van Etten Lake, both of those are complete. The remedial designs for both of those IRAs are complete. And the interim remedial actions are ongoing, and I'm going to give you a more detailed update on that in a following slide. So the next slide that we have is a summary of all of the Pfas actions that have taken place at Wordsmith today. And this slide, I think, is really important. It conveys a lot of information, and I want to spend a few minutes on it because I do think it's really important to kind of let everyone know everything that's happened at Wordsmith. And on the left side, we kind of have the activities broken out into the circular process, the RI sampling, and those investigation activities, while the right side of the slide includes the removal actions, the interim remedial actions, and some additional IRA data summary. So you can see on the left for the circular process and the PA-SI, you can see when the PA was completed, the SI was done in 2018, the expanded SI in 2019, and then we move on down to where we are right now, which is the remedial investigation, or RI, which started in the fieldwork started in 2021. We have a summary for the RI of the data that we've collected, and it's hard for me to see that. But you can see the numbers. We've collected a lot of samples so far since we started the RI field work. A couple hundred, over 1,000 soil samples and groundwater samples that we've collected so far. And then I have the groundwater info at the bottom. We've done hydraulic profiling, borings, we've done soil borings, we've done vertical aquifer sampling across the base, and then off-site locations, we've sampled existing monitoring wells, and we've sampled some seeps out there. So you can see from all of these bullets and the numbers that we've collected a lot of data over the last year. As far as the removal actions, I have those listed out on the right. Starting out with FTO2, that was the first action that was taken out there for a removal action related to PFAS, and that was completed in 2015. The CTS, groundwater time critical removal action, was completed in 2018. That's the central treatment system building. We upgraded Mission Street and treated the discharge water from Mission Street, completed that in 2019 with a resin system. And then the FTO2 soil time critical removal action was completed in 2021. So those interim remedial actions that we're talking about now, FTO2 at Clark's Marsh, Van Etten Lake at Kenrat Lake Memorial Park, both of those are going to be completed in 2022. And as Steve mentioned earlier, there's a new IRA that is proposed for the alert aircraft area that's going to start next year. And then down at the bottom, I just have some information data about the IRAs that have been installed, the number 18 extraction wells for the 2 IRAs that are currently ongoing, and all the performance monitoring wells we've installed, the piezometers. As you can see, again, a lot of activity has taken place out there, and I'm sure if you guys have been driving around, you've seen a lot of activity on F41 out there where we've been working. But I just thought it was really important to kind of give everyone just a summary of everything that's happened out there. So a lot of activity that the Air Force has done. So I'm going to give you a quick update. Yes.
What's a piezometer?
A piezometer is, it's like a small monitoring well that is used to collect water level data. So it's very similar to a monitoring well, it's just smaller diameter, typically 1 inch. Sorry. Tim, do we want to do questions, or you want to wait until we're at the end?
I would suggest that if there is one that's really specific to a particular slide, then let's address that. But if there are others that we can hold till the end of the presentation, that might be best. So critical questions about slides, feel free. Is there one you'd like to pose? Let's go back.
Sure. Okay.
And so we cannot hear anyone besides Paula. Whoever's at the mic.
I don't think, Kathy, I don't think they can hear you.
So what we will try to do, yeah, please do come on up, and then if other questions emerge, we will restate the question and proceed that way. But Kathy was the bar.
All right. So my question is so you've listed these out. I really appreciate it. That's visual. At some point between 2015 and now, I heard an estimate of about 18 filtration systems for just this site. We're at about between 3 and 4 right now? Yeah. Okay. So, but we still need about 18 to address the entire site. Is that right? Well, I can say I've heard that, but I'm not sure where that number came from, and I don't know if Steve maybe or some of the legacy folks here have information. I have heard that before, but I don't have any information on where that number actually came from. So I can't answer your question. Okay, on that.
The reason that I bring that up, I just want to put it into perspective for people. That we really are 7 years into this, and we're still have a long way to go.
Right.
So,
yeah, thank you. No, that's a great question.
I'm not sure where the 18 came from, but the focus of the IRAs is to try and get some interim treatment in place for high concentrations of PFAS that are creating exposures, whether it's going into Van Etten Lake or even going down into Clark's Marsh. So the number may have come from very early in the process before we started the RI and had a good understanding. But as we're collecting data and we're identifying areas where there's high concentrations of PFAS that are creating exposure hazards for primarily for public health, but also for the environment. They're more looking at those areas for IRAs. So whether the number will actually be 18, I couldn't tell you at this point. As we continue to collect the data and identify areas that need an IRA, we'll do that. Long-term, in the CERCLA process, as we saw on the previous slide, we'll do a feasibility study. We'll look at all the data that's been collected, not only in the RI, but in the SI and the ESI as well, and identify the areas that require some type of remediation. We'll also include the risk assessment in that process, and identify permanent long-term solutions which will, in all likelihood, take advantage of the existing treatment systems and expand on those where necessary to put in permanent remediation to address the PFAS.
Thank you. Any other questions on this slide? I know there's a lot of information here.
I have one. My question is, sampled 120 existing wells. Where are
Yes.
those?
Where are the wells? They're across the base.
Okay, so they're on the base, those are monitoring wells?
Some of them are, well, not all of them are on the base. Some of those 120 are in Clark's Marsh with some existing wells, but they're all related to other sites or other IRP sites that were on base already. Well, Clark's Marsh is not within the base. Yeah, so Clark's Marsh was off-site, yeah.
But those are all existing wells from the legacy contaminants.
Yeah. Right, so we wanted to use, we have a lot of existing wells at Wordsmith over the years. There have been hundreds of wells installed out there. So we wanted to use what was available to us as much as possible without having to install new ones, so. All right, so a quick, just another summary of the RI. The remedial investigation began in July of 2021, like I mentioned a little bit earlier. We have performed investigations across the former installation and downgraded and off base to areas to the south and east of Van Etten Creek. So we're continuing to expand our investigation area, and we're looking at other areas on base. We're not quite complete with that yet, and the investigation will continue until the groundwater plumes are delineated. That's the goal of the RI. And then the investigation will continue into next year and include some areas east of Van Etten Lake, and we will develop an addendum to the work plan or the UFP-QAP at that time once we develop the scope to do that. So we're going to continue the investigation. We're not finished yet. Like I said, we'll go on into, that will continue into next year. We have some work to do also down in Clark's Marsh, some additional sampling down there, in addition to what we've already done.
Okay, a couple of questions I have is, you say investigation to continue the groundwater plumes are delineated.
Correct.
Okay, the current schedule shows that the RI is to be complete by 2023. What if this investigation goes beyond that?
All of the decisions that we make are data-driven.
Yep.
So as long as the data, as we continue to collect data, if decisions that need to be made to collect additional data, we'll do that. We are anticipating right now that it'll be done in 2023. But if the data tells us there's additional work to be done, then that'll take place. But
So my second question.
Actually, Steve, what was that? She covered it. All right, go.
The last item, the east side of Van Etten Lake.
yes.
The addendum, when will that addendum be developed and put into the RI plan?
So based on the data that we have right now, we are working with the Air Force to develop the best path forward for that, working with Eagle and how we're going to accomplish that. So that will probably be sometime next year, and I'll let Steve add anything to that.
Yeah, our plan is to work on the paperwork aspect of it, getting the addendum written, reviewed by Eagle, approved, and in place, so that next year when the field season starts, we're ready to go and implement that.
Thank you. And Fantina, let me just check in to see if you were able to hear that comment that Stephen Willis just made.
Yeah, seems complicated.
Great. Okay, thank you. All right, Arnie, I think you have a question. Come on up.
Thank you. On the second bullet, the investigation across the installation in south and east. My question revolves around the topic of what criteria are you now using to plan how far and what criteria of sampling are you going to be using? And I just want to add, if you think, 2 weeks ago, John Gillespie, the subject matter expert for NAVCAC Air Force, stated, I believe, half of the criteria he wants to see the Air Force go beyond half of the groundwater criteria by state. Right now, it's 8 parts per trillion for PFOA. So he's saying we want to sample down to 4. Keep going until we hit 4. Is that right? Did you hear that? No. Well, that's what I heard John say. I'm wondering what criteria are your team using to tell you how far you're going to go?
Right now, we are using the EAGLE criteria, just like you said. PFOA is 8, PFAS is 16, and there's a couple of other ones in there. But that's the criteria that we're currently using. Our detection limits for PFAS and PFOA right now are running around 4 nanograms per liter. So once you get to 8, the difference down to 4 is obviously not a huge jump. So, but we're using 8 at this point for PFOA and 16 for PFAS.
And those are spelled out in the QAP.
Yes, Mark.
They are written in our plan that those are the values we're using for step outs.
Since the QAP was written, the EPA on July 15th or June 15th came up with new health assessment numbers. And that is essentially non-detect. Is the Air Force incorporating that into this plan and following the plume to the non-detect edge?
I'll let Steve answer.
So those EPA numbers were interim numbers, and they are not enforceable. They're advisory numbers. So at this point in time, we are not using them. We are continuing to use the EAGLE values that have been promulgated.
All right. Okay, so let's talk a little bit now about the interim remedial actions that have been conducted out there. And Ben stole a little bit of my thunder a little while ago. Thanks, Ben. We are very excited to announce that the FTO2 at Clark's Marsh treatment system is up and running. And it has been for over 24 hours now, almost a day and a half. And we have treated already over 270,000 gallons of water from that system. So really, I think that's all we need to say here. This one is up and running. We're very excited about it. And if anybody has any questions on FTO2 at Clark's Marsh, I'd be happy to answer your questions on that. But we finally got this one turned on. We're very excited. So, any questions on that one? Ahead of schedule, Dave, by the way. All right, so the IRA at Bennett at Ken Ratliff Memorial Park at Bennett and Lake, this one is still under construction. It will follow FTO2 by a few weeks. The building has been constructed, and I think if anyone has been around there, you can see that. We are still working on doing some underground piping work out there and getting the final electrical and mechanical inside the building. So we've got a couple of weeks left, and then I think we'll be ready to start our testing period and have this one turned on. We're looking right now at the middle of September to have this one up and running. So, any questions on this one? We're getting real close. So, we're excited. Question mark? Oh, sorry, I thought you raised your hand. All right, so just a quick summary of the project schedule, the timeline. So this is the same one that we show at every RAB meeting, just to give everyone an idea of kind of where we are. So So we started the IRA for FTO2 back last October. So we're going to we're wrapping up now in August. Bennett Lake was started in March, and we're going to be wrapping that one up in September. And like I mentioned earlier, with the data that we've collected, we're going to be continuing RI field work through November of next year. Any questions on the schedule? Okay.
I don't know if this question should go to you or Steve, but this information here, the timeline, is based on the 2 IRAs. And currently, they're going to have the pilot study, the additional IRA for the alert, and some of the other stuff. Is this going to be expanded to add that information on?
Sure, yes, we can add those to the timeline.
Okay.
And that is the end of my briefing. If anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them. Yes. Sorry, everybody has to get up this time.
I appreciate the numbers that you've shown. In the past, you've shown us locations for the wells and so on, and there is some relationship to the charts we've seen out there that show plumes. There's a lot of unknown stuff in those plumes. Could we expect at some time to see your sampling locations and how those are expanded to define the edges of the areas? And that in particular comes to my mind. I see at the southwest end of the runway, Allen Lake, as long as I've been part of the RAB, there's been a do not eat fish advisory in Allen Lake. That means that Pfas, PFOA, with apparently common sense, must have come from AFFF or some Air Force action that is out in that area. Yet I see nothing in those pictures that indicates plumes at a level. We were assured years ago that you would keep expanding your investigation until you found the end of your plume. But data that you have biomass that is adversely affected, and yet it doesn't seem to relate to what we see. Could you answer how we could expect to see that addressed someplace in the future in your plan?
Yeah, and I will start by saying, in some of those investigation areas that are on the west end of the runway are where those plumes come down, as you've seen on the maps out here in the poster station, are in Clark's Marsh, and we have just gotten, in the last couple of months, access to that property. So we have not been able yet to go down there and do some additional investigation south of that, and then south of the wastewater treatment plant. So that's part of the RI that will go on, because we just haven't had a chance to get down there yet to do that. So yes, there will be additional work done over there by that lake and on the western side of the runway, or south side of the runway on the western end.
That area really has nothing to do with Clark's Marsh. It's west rather than south.
Right, but all that's Forest Service property, sorry. Yeah, so we have so we have just gotten access to that in the last couple of months, so we're trying to plan to get down in there to do that work, and that is very wooded and it's logistically very difficult and complicated, so we're working on the best way to access those areas down in there for all of the RI sampling. Actually, we're working through that right now. As far as the biological component, so we're working on the risk assessment work plan right now, and that has not been finalized. We're still working with Eagle on that. We're hoping that that will be final sometime next month. And that will have a lot of the information, or how we are going to look at and evaluate that biological data that we're going to be collecting from around the base. So.
And just a note for our court reporter, that previous questions was from Mr. Bill Gaines. For turning into a question over here, Steve, anything that you wanted to add to that response?
I don't think so.
Okay, all right. Mark, question for you.
I have a data question, please. I noticed that the Air Force has installed what appears to be performance monitoring wells on the lake side of the IRA for Ratliff Park, and that you have people out there sampling those.
Yes.
My question is a two-part question. At the locations that those wells were installed, was vertical aquifer sampling performed?
Vertical aquifer sampling was not performed at the specific locations where the performance monitoring wells were installed. The performance monitoring wells were identified based on information for other parts of the RI and the other information that we collected for the IRAs, because those wells are to monitor the performance of the treatment system. So we did not do vertical aquifer sampling for those performance monitoring wells. We knew the zones that we wanted to monitor, and that's how we determined the depths of the screens for those wells.
Okay, I guess that negates my second question. Thank you.
Let's see, Arnie, would you like to go ahead?
I got a bunch of questions. Two-part question. One of them regarding the sampling, new sampling, Clark's Marsh, and all the approvals that you need. Can you tell us how much you've reviewed the state data over the last 7 years, 8 years? And is there any data that is there, sampling data that they've collected, that can inform you of something ahead of time, rather than wait? That's question number one.
Yes, and when we developed the UOP QAP, or the work plan, we looked at the data that the state had available, the groundwater data that they collected, the monitoring wells that they installed in Clark's Marsh, the surface water data that they collected. So all of that data went into developing the plan for the RI for sampling in Clark's Marsh. So yes, we did look at that data.
And the other question is to Steve. I appreciate the answer you gave to someone's question, I think it was David's, regarding the schedule, and does the schedule allow for you to look at new IRAs, interim remedial actions, and you said it does, if I heard you correct.
If we're talking about the aircraft alert area IRA, yes, we can add that to the schedule.
Okay. How about the budget? Are you also working on a budget to pay for some of those new IRAs?
We have the money to pay for that IRA. We should have a contract awarded for that new IRA this fiscal year. So yes, funding is not an issue.
So you've already estimated 1 or 2 additional IRAs that we know nothing about?
No, I'm specifically talking about the alert aircraft area IRA.
Okay.
Beyond that, not sure what we've got programmed.
Okay, because what's the lead time for budget? We've already in a no contract signed for a 9-month delay, and I'm thinking that was budget related, so.
The delay with the RI is not budget driven. It's contract driven. Funding has not been an issue. There's actually money programmed for 2 years, a large sum of money for additional IRAs for Wordsmith in 2024. At this point, we need to finish collecting the RI data and identify if there's needs for that funding, and then put those in place.
I see David Wynn has a number of questions. David, would you like to try to see if you're able to be heard here?
Yeah, unless you want to do it after the break.
Sure. Yeah, it's a good point. So we are nearing the time that we had set aside for the break. After the break, we have quite a bit of time set aside just for RAB members' questions. So to continue that effort, let me just ask if there are any crucial questions really specific to this presentation that we should address in the next few minutes before we take a break. Well, it's 6:15 now. Let's come back at 6:25. So 6:25 we will begin again. And during the break, if y'all could put us on mute, please. And we are on break for 10 minutes until 6:20. Thank you.
Restoration advisory board meetings are focused on environmental restoration, but occasionally questions come up about other matters, and so Mr. Willis has provided some additional health-related resources that might be a benefit just for awareness. Again, our focus remains on environmental restoration, environmental cleanup for the year. Thank you for your flexibility, trying to make this hybrid meeting work. One thing I do want to suggest.
Can you hold on a minute? Wait a minute, they're having problems.
No problem. Sure. Let me know when I'm clear to continue. So again, welcome back for those who are with us virtually. For the RAB members, let me invite you to use that King Lear voice, your high school theater tryouts. So really project towards the closest of the desktop microphones. That should work as long as we see clearly and loudly. And then we can adjust, the AV folks can adjust that from the back of the room as needed. So let's try that if we could. And thanks for your patience and for your flexibility. Again, focus of environmental restoration advisory board is on cleanup, but occasionally questions come up with health matters, and so Mr. Willis provided a few useful websites there for additional health-related questions. So our next portion of the agenda really then is RAB member questions, and so we've made it through the.
Tim, you're cutting in and out. I'm only catching a word every maybe 20, 30 seconds.
Wait, there's that one. I asked this one to answer people.
Put that in there.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Quintina, a quick sound check. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right. So again, we have made it through the technical presentation. The majority of the time that we have remaining until around 8 o'clock or so is for RAB members' questions and then for some public comments as well. And so I really want to just engage in any discussion the RAB members have. After we do that for a period of time, we'll invite those who do not happen to be RAB members to make public comments as well. But for right now, let's engage in some discussion with the RAB members. David Nguyen, would you mind asking the first question? I see you have a list of those. And yeah, so we have David Nguyen who's going to kick us off. David's going to ask his first question. Quintina, I'm going to then turn to you and just confirm that you're able to hear that question and then proceed from there and see if we can make the desktop mics work. Go ahead, David.
Based on our pre-RAB meeting that we had with the community RAB members approximately a week ago, we sat and put together a list of questions that we had that we wanted to address. And one of the first questions is that initially when we sent you a preliminary list that said that there were certain things that we'd like to have added to the agenda. And one of those was the RI data, okay? And we were told that the RI data at that point, based on a response from you, that the RI data was not available. My main question here is that in the past, we requested a technical review of all the current RI data in the CSM. When Catherine Varley was here, that was never an issue. And now, when we asked for a technical review, your response is that it wouldn't be available till February or May of next year, okay? Because the RI data wasn't going to be available. Well, the RI data is available, and I'd like to understand why we can't have a technical review with the data and the CSM before, not now versus 6 months.
If I could, Mr. Willis, before responding to that, let me just check in. Quintina, were you able to hear that question from David Nguyen?
Loud and clear, thank you.
Excellent. Go ahead.
So I talked with Mark Henry at lunch today. We are going to have a technical session before the November RAB, and we will present an updated CSM with all the data that's been collected to date. We actually have, as Paula mentioned, we've got some sampling down in Clark's Marsh that'll be done late this fall. We're still working through logistics to get down there and get that sampling done. So there's a potential, there's a few data points down there that won't be included in that updated CSM, but we'll have everything else that we've collected, including the stuff along Van Etten Creek, in that updated CSM, and provide that. That will be an afternoon session prior to the November RAB.
Thank you.
So
Okay.
you have another question?
Yeah, I have multiple questions, but the second question I have is that the RI work plan, okay? Right now, there's approximately, as I understand, Eagle submitted their comments. There's approximately 186 unresolved comments. And based on a letter that was sent from Eagle to you, Steve, on May the 26th, it says that they have concerns about the RI will not characterize the source of PFAS contamination and determine the nature and extent of the contamination as required by the DERP. My question is how can you guys proceed with the RI when you have approximately 186 unresolved comments that Eagle has concerns about that are not being addressed?
So we're in the process of working with Eagle to work through that list. On that list is sampling on the east side of Van Etten Lake as well as the east side of Van Etten Creek. The Air Force does intend to sample those areas. There's a few other items on that list. We've already worked with Eagle and agreed to sample in those locations, and we're working on the actual implementation of that. We'll sit down with Eagle with our proposed sample locations, get buy-in, make adjustments if we need to, and then proceed with that work. So we are continuing to work with them to address the concerns in that letter. We are going to provide an interim response because it is a fairly lengthy list. We can't definitively say at this point, yes, we can take care of all these, or no, we can't. We're working through it. As Paula indicated, the RI is data-driven, and so as we're collecting additional data, we're able to address Eagle's concerns. And so we'll continue to do that until we either come to a point where we're going to have to agree to disagree, or we can resolve all their concerns.
Okay.
And if I could jump in, Mr. Kline, would you like to add anything to that response?
No, not really. I think that's accurate. We're going to be working with the Air Force and trying to work through those items on that list. So our understanding is that, yes, we'll be engaging on those items.
If we could turn to another question of David Lynn's, and then after that, I'll see if other RAB members have questions, and then we can also come back. We have some time available. So David?
Okay. My next question pertains to the risk assessment plan. You guys have put together a preliminary risk assessment plan. You've given a copy to Eagle and reviewed it, but yet the community is not able to see what that risk assessment plan is. Why?
Currently, under the circular process, documents that are made available for public review and comment are the proposed plan, in which we define the remedy that's been selected, take public comment, incorporate that, and then in the ROD, we actually define the final remedy. The circular process does not have provisions for public comment on documents prior to that point in the circular process. So we've been following that at this point in time.
Thank you, and we'll come back to, I think you have a few other questions.
Yep.
Let me invite the other RAB members, and the other RAB members who might have questions. We'll start with those who are here in person. Any other questions for the RAB members? Yes, go ahead, sir.
Okay, it's one of our questions. North of Harrisville is a little tank farm that the Air Force used. Is there any studies being done or have been done to indicate whether there was contamination there as well? And did they store, I'm sure they did they store the PFAS up there to put out any possible fire, since it was a Air Force facility and tanks full of fuel?
I'm not familiar with that site, but I'll look into it.
Okay. And that question being from Mr. Maxwell. Thank you very much, Mr. Maxwell. Any further questions that you have on that or follow-up that you'd like to?
Not at this point.
All right. Thanks, sir. Other RAB members in person who might like to ask a question. Mr. Martin.
Take care of
Arnie Rhodes.
Regarding your response, Stephen, I appreciate it, and also David Kline, your response. It's a lot of work to go through all these comments and everything, but we have not talked about the elephant in the room, and that is, while you're working through that, and you've been working now for over a year on some of these, the public is not seeing anything unless you bring it to us in some kind of a technical session, or you give us a presentation, not the actual data and report, but you give us a presentation of the criteria that you're using and the areas that you're investigating, or you probably will investigate, for the risk assessment plan. And so the ecological risk assessment and human risk assessment matrix, which is a best practice by EPA. I understand it's in the QAP, Paula told me. I still haven't found it, and I still don't know why the Air Force can't give us a technical presentation of that as soon as possible.
So we did have a technical session on the ecological risk assessment prior to the November RAB meeting. We brought 2 ecological risk assessors in and did that. As far as the plans go for the ecological risk assessment, as soon as those are finalized, they'll be posted to the Acronym record. They'll be available for you to look at. So those documents are still in work at this point. They will be made available when they're finalized.
Okay.
One thing to note also, during the break, I mentioned to the RAD members, I was up and down a bit trying to make sure microphones are working and so on. And I may have missed a few action items that were mentioned in the previous discussion. So I'd like to invite the RAD member, those who are here in person and those who are connected remotely, if you have possible action items that you'd like the co-chairs to consider in their co-chair meeting, which will occur a couple of weeks after this next meeting, please do send those my way. I'll consolidate those, share those with the co-chairs as well. I'll also be trying to capture them here, but I'd like to make sure I capture them in your words as well. Okay, so before turning to those RAD members who are on the phone virtually, any other questions here? Mark Henry.
Yes, if you could please put up on the screen the map of Wordsmith, just the aerial photograph.
Oh, help me out to set the,
That'll work fine. Okay, the small arms firing range is about right here. And there's a plume, I believe it's a TCE plume that originates about right here. And it travels across the runway and discharges into Clark's Marsh about there. Back in, let me guess, 2010, 2009, the Air Force installed a passive treatment system here where they injected emulsified vegetable oil into the groundwater to help break down the contamination before it gets to Clark's Marsh. Since that time, the Air Force has put in a treatment system where they have a bunch of pumping wells along here. And my question is, does the operation of this fire training area pumping system, has it diverted the flow, which was straight as an arrow to here, and has that center of mass moved off to the east such that the passive treatment system is working or not working? It wouldn't take much, maybe a 5 or 10 degree shift
in the direction of groundwater in that area for that plume to completely miss the treatment system, because it's a very narrow treatment system. The plume was very well behaved before the Air Force started pumping a lot of groundwater. And so I would like that question answered. Before risk assessments are done for that plume, before other things, has the Air Force and the state agreed that the center of mass of that plume has not migrated to a location where it is no longer being treated?
Okay. So I did, based on our conversation at lunch, I did some preliminary checking on that, and the indications are that no, the purge wells from FTO2 have not impacted that plume, but I will do a little further research on it. Let's go ahead and take that as a formal action item, and I'll get you a formal response.
Thank you.
Okay, let me just check in with those RAB members who are on the connected virtually real quick, and then Kathy will come to you for a question. So RAB members who are connected virtually or via phone, do you have questions for discussion? Any items, comments, or questions from the RAB members who are connected virtually? Okay, let's go to Kathy Wisprop.
Okay, earlier in the meeting, you had mentioned that there was going to be some work done on looking at potential other sources of PFAS other than the AFFF, and I'm wondering if you could share with me the rationale for looking for those and what the other suspected sources might be.
I couldn't necessarily identify suspected sources, but we know that PFAS is ubiquitous in the environment. It's in fast food wrappers, it's in all kinds of stuff. So various industrial processes that were used at Wordsmith in the past may also have contributed PFAS. So we're going back and looking at that.
Okay, thank you. I have another question. At the Senate hearing, there were some representatives from a company called Battelle, and they were talking about a technology called the incinerator and the annihilator, sorry. And I am wondering about any timelines in terms of their, any work that they are going to be doing or the technology that could be discussed here.
So they are teamed with a couple of other companies on an ESTCP demonstration project for that technology. And I can never remember the acronym, so if you've got your acronym list handy, it's the Environmental Security Technology Certification Program. And, excuse me, like I said, they've got that as a demonstration project that's funded under this ESTCP. My understanding is that they have they made it through the first gate of that process, and they have an interview in the next week or two to get funding to do the actual full field demonstration of that technology.
Thank you.
Okay, let me check in again. Go ahead, sir.
Over the years, starting in the 80s, we started pumping for RIs for volatile compounds and organics and so on, and that went through the Mission Street and all the treatment systems. The effluent from that went into the various stormwater treatment systems, and of course at that time there wasn't any treatment system for PFAS, any of the elements in that. So for years, water that was laden with PFAS was pumped out of the ground through those stormwater treatment plants. Has any plan been made to look at the internals of those storm sewers to know what might have stuck from years and years of polluted water going through them? And if so, what that might be and where might that fit into your plans?
So yes, we do actually have that included in our QAP for the RI to do stormwater sewer sampling. It's work that hasn't been done yet, but it is in our plan and will be done next year. So absolutely.
Okay, and there a question, Ms. Gaines, and that QAP, the Quality Assurance Project Plan for the RI, which is the remedial investigation. Yes, sir, go ahead.
I have a follow-up question to Bill's question.
Please do.
Does that work proposed in the RI work plan include testing at the end of the pipe where the central treatment plant discharges into Van Etten Creek? The question arises from the potential where you have the central treatment system that is discharging very low concentrations of PFAS, either non-detect or below your requirements. But is any testing being done at the end of the pipe to see if that water that was basically clean is actually picking up contamination, legacy contamination, PFAS contamination from when much higher concentrations were being pumped through there?
Paula, help me here, but I don't believe we've got that specific aspect planned.
Right, we are planning on collecting surface water samples from Van Etten Creek, which is where the central treatment system stormwater discharges to. So we are collecting samples up and down gradient of that discharge, yes.
May I recommend that you actually take a sample of that discharge to show if the reutilization of that storm sewer is actually bringing legacy contamination into Van Etten Creek? Because once it gets to the creek, it gets diluted extremely.
Right, and we know that the discharge from the CTS, because we do sample the discharge before it actually goes into the storm, so yeah. Okay.
But if you have a contaminated pipe that could leach out material and recontaminate that water, it would be very good to know.
Yes, that's something we can look at.
Thank you.
All right, yes, sir, Arnie Lord.
Has Eagle raised this issue about end of pipe? Because either the state sampled there 5 years ago or the Air Force was. Someone was sampling that pipe at the end with its effluent.
Yeah, I think we collected some data from that, but I'm not familiar with the details there. We could go back and look and let you know. But we've been concerned about the discharge from the through pipe drain all the way down.
What was the last thing you said?
I said we've been concerned with that, but I don't know the details personally.
But the state has not, in the meantime, sampled on some frequency?
Not on a regular basis.
Out of your own pocket? You can't do this more money, but... Okay.
Correct, yeah, not on a regular basis.
Let me just pause real quick and check in with our RAB members who have joined virtually. Any questions that you have? And are there any raised hands that you see? Okay. All right, we will continue on here in person. Go ahead, Boogie.
Just a comment, the Mission Street treatment plant discharges at a different location. That would also be a candidate for the same sampling, please.
Yes, you're correct.
Just to follow up again, Greg Schultz, Rex Vaughn, anything that you'd like to add in at the moment?
This is Rex. I don't have anything to add at this time. Thank you.
Thanks, Rex.
Nor do I. Greg Schultz.
Thanks, Greg. All right. Well, good. Let's turn back here.
Okay. Another question I have is the BCT meeting minutes. I understand that there was a BCT meeting in May. Eagle got minutes, but none of the community RAB received any minutes. And as we also understand, based on the Senate hearing on August the 1st from the Deputy Assistant Director, is that the BCT meetings are supposed to be summarized in the RAB meetings. Is that something that you guys are going to be doing going forward?
The minutes are supposed to be distributed to you, and if I didn't get you the May meeting minutes, then I'll do that. My apologies for that. We can summarize those meeting minutes in this forum if that's something you desire.
It's not us. We were told that according to the Deputy Assistant Director of the Air Force, is that that's being done already.
Okay.
So So, yeah, I guess we would like to, if it's something that you guys can do, Steve, we appreciate it.
Sure.
Yes, Steve, that actually has never been occurring since the township was basically asked to stop attending the BRAC meetings, the BCT meetings. So there's been no summary like this at all. This has been one of the reasons why earlier in the list of questions, when people were providing their updates, I think it was Kathy who pointed out that this is one of the concerns that we keep bringing to the Air Force, because it is actually affecting the transparency feeling between the Air Force and the community. We don't know what's going on in there, and we don't have any readout.
So I know I've shared at least 2 of the BCT meeting minutes since I've taken over as the BAC, the BRAC Environmental Coordinator, after Dr. Varley left.
To whom? Where?
I've emailed them to the RAB members. They're also...
To everybody here.
Yes.
Because he's saying that he didn't get it. I don't.
We didn't get the May minutes were not distributed.
Typically speaking, May, and I may not have sent them.
Let me jump in real quick if I could. We have one hard-working court reporter, and she can capture everything any of us say, but she can't capture everything all of us say all at once. So, Steve Willis, go ahead.
I have shared previous BCT meeting minutes. I may have failed to send out the May ones, and I'll get those out as soon as I get the opportunity.
Thank you.
And Mr. Cummings, your comment was that that's a key element of transparency and communication among organizations.
Yeah, because there is no township presentation, I should say, participation at the BCT meetings anymore, and there hasn't been for several years.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Martin.
Not a question, but a comment. If at the RAB meetings, even if the summary of the BCT meeting has not been prepared and reviewed by all the agencies, you could still give a verbal report on what transpired at the latest BCT meeting. And I think everyone would benefit.
All right, thank you very much. All right. What other questions do the RAB members have? Kathy,
I'm going to circle back to the wastewater treatment plant facility structure. And I understand that Mark Henry presented some information to both Eagle and to the U.S. Air Force. And I'd like to hear some thoughts on that presentation that they heard. Any value, any decisions, any comments about that presentation that Mark had given?
From the Air Force perspective, it's been months ago, and I honestly don't recall the specifics of his presentation, but I can relook at that.
And I'm assuming that you're referring to, this is Charlie Bauer from Water Research Institute, Eagle. I'm assuming you're referring to the presentation where Mark was talking about potential movement of plume based on the discharge from the wastewater treatment plant.
Yes.
Groundwater there, is that what you're talking about?
That's right.
Yeah, so we have looked at that. Actually, we have looked at what cost options might be for what a surface water discharge would be if you changed that up and we provided that to the township. So it's very expensive to change that up. It's certainly something that can be looked at in terms of whether or not it is having an impact on employees. We have not evaluated that at this point.
Charlie, I'm sorry, this is Kathy again. I missed that last thing that you said.
Yeah, just that we have, in terms of the potential impact of that discharge on the human, we have not evaluated at this point.
Okay, and that was Charlie Bauer, Water Resources Division of Michigan Eagle.
Thank you.
Kathy, any follow-up on that question?
No.
All right, I'll come back here if you have a few more questions, David, Lynn, but let me just check in with those RAB members who are on the line. Do you have any questions for us, any discussion? Okay, we'll move now to David Wynn and then two others who are
I
here.
have one last question. Steve, you mentioned the pilot study for the three-pipe stitch. The question I guess I have is, and I guess I'd like Mark's input on this, is that there is supposedly a 4-foot pipe that drains into the three-pipe stitch that has a high PFAS concentration, and I'm wondering what this pilot study, if you're going to be looking at that 4-foot pipe as well as the three-pipe stitch as well.
So the pipe you're talking about actually goes into a oil water separator and then comes out of that oil water separator and into three-pipe stitch. And yes, we are looking, our pilot study is downstream of that.
Okay.
So it will address that PFAS in the surface water.
Okay. Are you good with it? Thank you.
Okay, other questions from the RAB members who are here? Yes, sir. Mark Henry.
I understand that perhaps by the end of this month, the EPA is going to identify PFOS and PFOA as hazardous substances under CERCLA, where they have not been identified as such before. But under the new EPA roadmap for PFAS, that is one of their goals, and I was going to ask the Air Force what effect having those as listed waste is going to be on the RI and RA process.
This is Sharon Brazega for the Air Force. I'm an attorney that assists AFPEC. We don't know if or when that's actually going to happen without them becoming certified hazardous substances. I don't see any impact on the RI. The Air Force has already been investigated in the circle of contaminants, so it should not affect the RI at all.
Thank you, Sharon. I appreciate that. Steve, any additional comments?
I just will say that the soil removed during the TICRA, as well as any investigation-derived waste, is being treated as hazardous waste. It's not considered hazardous waste by the EPA, but we are treating it as such for disposal, just to be on the safe side.
Mark, does that address the question?
Yes, it does.
Thank you. All right. I know it.
I'd like to hear the status of the fourth 5-year review report.
Our contractor is currently addressing the Air Force comments on that document. Once they've addressed the Air Force technical team's comments, it'll go for Air Force legal review, and then for Eagle's review, and then will be issued as a final document.
So it has not been sent to Eagle yet?
Correct.
And correct me if I'm wrong, it's 2.5 years overdue?
Probably at least 2 years yet. Correct.
And is there a reason that you could inform us of?
There were some issues with some of the sites, and FTO2 in particular. There was a ROD put in place that was never actually signed.
Right.
So we're having to go back and address some of the open items from legacy activities and close those loops so that we can appropriately address them in the 5-year review.
And that ROD is the IRA FTO2?
It was the IRA for VOCs at FTO2. So it predated the PFAS issue. We got a ROD for VOCs at FTO2 that didn't get signed.
So for those of you flipping through your acronym list, that's the
Sorry.
interim remedial action for volatile organic compounds at FT02. So I speak acronym, I would say.
Yeah, ROD is record of decision.
Okay.
I have a follow-up question to Arnie's question. Is the public going to have the opportunity to provide comments to this 5-year review document?
At this point in time, the circular process does not have provisions for that.
And to Arnie.
A follow-up. About a year ago, I asked similar question, status of the 5-year review. And I think an answer came back, and I think Sharon, you might have been the one, said that FT02 IRA, or the interim remedial action for Pfas in 2015, it went online, was not going to be part of this 5-year review because it was a time-critical action, and I have not seen that. And do I have an accurate understanding of what Catherine said at that RAB meeting about the time-critical?
This is Sharon. I don't remember that statement. I don't remember me or Catherine making that statement. I think we ended up, I'm reaching back to, I have to look at my notes on this, and it's been, I think since a year ago we talked about that. But I think I said the interim actions would all be captured in the 5-year review. That's what we should be doing is on that. On removal actions, don't always have to go into a 5-year review, but I think the plan was Wordsmith one. Steve can correct me if I'm wrong with it. I think the plan is that since those are they're ground areas, they're big areas on the base, or things that are being focused on, that those removal actions will be discussed. But the 5-year review is supposed to look and only evaluate final remedial action. So we may mention that there's an interim remedial action or something like that, but they're not the ones that are there. Removals and interim remedial actions, because they're not final remedies, their effectiveness are not evaluated in a 5-year review.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. We appreciate that. We have about 5 minutes or so remaining for RAB member questions and discussion. Let me just check in again with our RAB members who've joined us virtually. Greg Schultz, Rex Vaughn, let's see, Penny Vidge, and Jesse Stundebeck. Any questions or discussion that y'all would like to have?
This is Rex.
Okay, thanks, Rex.
Greg Schultz. No.
Thank you, Greg. Okay, well, so any other questions for the RAB members here in person? All right. Okay, so we're a few minutes ahead of schedule, but let's go ahead and move now into the public comment portion of the agenda. This is an important element of all of our RAB meetings, and so the RAB members have had the opportunity to meet, to discuss, to engage in conversation, and now this is an opportunity for those who are not members of the Restoration Advisory Board to make comments to the RAB members themselves. So I'd like to provide the opportunity for folks to come in and make a 3-minute comment to the RAB. Attendees who are here in person, we'll start with you. Any attendees who are here in person, if you'd like to, you can begin to line up at the microphones being set up. We'll go through those who are here in person first, and then we'll go to those who have joined virtually. So if you've joined virtually, you can raise your hand electronically, and I'll look back to you to see who we have next in the queue once we get to that point. If you've joined by telephone, so again, not just RAB members, anyone else who's joined by telephone, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 and lower it again by pressing *9, and then mute yourself, unmute by *6. So again, let's start with those who are here in person. Who would like to make a comment to the RAB? Mr. Daniel? Okay, and if you could start with your name, if you would like to share that, and then make your comments.
Yes, my name is Anthony Spanicola. In a letter to Congress dated July 27th of this year, the Department of Defense stated, and I quote, DoD works in collaboration with regulatory agencies, communities, and other stakeholders to ensure open and transparent information sharing. It is very clear from what has come down here tonight and what has come down here over the years that that statement is not true. Transparency is totally lacking in this group. We have members on this RAB board from the community who put in their time, who have incredible talents and resources to bring to bear. And I hear that it's the circular process doesn't provide for this, that, or the other thing. The circular process does not prohibit anywhere bringing members of the community in to the process at all. In fact, that was done in the BCT meetings for years and years and years until the township was kicked out. And I looked at a recent BCT meeting. We hear from the Air Force's attorneys that the Air Force policy only allows 2 or 3 people in the meeting. But I think at the last meeting that I saw, minutes for, there were 30-some people in attendance from 10 different agencies and private enterprises. No one, not a soul, not a single person from Oscoda, Michigan. That's wrong. And if the Department of Defense wants to make the commitment to work in collaboration, to be transparent, then do so. And do so here. In testimony before the United States Senate, we were told by the Department of Defense that they were going to throw the kitchen sink at Oscoda. We need to start by throwing the kitchen sink at the attitude that has resulted in this plantation mentality that everybody here serves at the whim and at the will of the Department of Defense. We have been talking about the township's storm sewers for I don't know how long. How long? We hear commitments and what happens? Nothing. Nothing. And the cost gets dumped on the local taxpayer. That's wrong. That's not collaboration. Now, Mr. Wynn talked about 4 interim remedial actions. We hope you'll take a serious look at those. Those are based on data from 2018, 4 years ago. This process has moved way too slowly. And if we're going to throw the kitchen sink at it, let's do it, and let's do it now. You can put up all sorts of data about test wells and this and that and the other thing. We need action. And I want to remind everyone here that there are 2 IRAs that are just being started, the Air Force opposed. The only reason that they're being done is because our representatives in Congress went to the mat with the Department of Defense. We need to see action, and we need to see it now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spangle. I appreciate that comment. Let's see. Continuing on with our public comments, Mr. Bob Delaney. Go ahead, Bob. You have 3 minutes, sir.
Hi, I'm Bob Delaney, retired from the state. Okay, it was somewhat ironic to hear that health advisory isn't something that the Air Force is going to use. Since 2014, the state of Michigan had criteria for water quality standards as for Pfas and Pfas as they went into surface water. Air Force steadfastly refused to follow those laws. They resorted to the health advisory from EPA, which was 400 and 200 parts per trillion. The state eventually passed drinking water criteria and other criteria, but the Air Force steadfastly refused to acknowledge those until pressure from Washington arrived and people at the highest levels agreed that they would follow state of Michigan law. But before that, they defaulted to the health advisory number of 70 parts per trillion for PFOS and PFOA, the EPA health advisory. Now, interestingly, we have the health advisory drops to 4 parts per quadrillion and 20 parts per quadrillion for the 2 chemicals. And now it's suddenly Michigan's criteria are the thing that they're going to default to. And so I explained this to you to understand how the game is played. So whichever number is more convenient, that's what the Air Force has used in the past. What I'd like to remind people of is that CERCLA defaults to ARARs, which is a state law, when their federal laws are less, or federal criteria or site-specific criteria that they've calculated are less restrictive than the state. So the state has a standard that is more restrictive than a site-specific risk assessment, then they will default to the state's laws. And so I'd like to see what the site-specific risk assessment would be based on the new studies that EPA has used for their health advisory. And I also think it would be very helpful for the RAB and all of us if an EPA expert came in and explained to us how these risk assessments are supposed to be done and how to really the Air Force general or DoD generally defaults to EPA when it comes to health and those kind of things. So it would be quite appropriate to have somebody from EPA come in and explain to us how these risk assessments are to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Delaney. We appreciate that comment. And continuing on with our members of the public who are here in person, is there anyone else who would like to make a comment tonight? Okay. Well, yes, Mr. Spangoli, go ahead.
I have a question. At the Senate testimony, in the Senate testimony, General Lester indicated that computer-generated human maps would no longer be used in the Air Force legal actions. I know that the IRA for Open Lake was based on that, at least the one we saw, and as well the Lighthouse for Clark's Marsh. Is that going to cause the Air Force not to go back and do a more accurate depiction of what needs to be done?
Okay. Mr. Willis, any immediate thoughts that you'd like to share on that one, or Paula?
Yeah. Go ahead, Paula.
Okay, that's a great question or comment. What I want to say first, I think, are you talking about the figures that were shown in the proposed plan for Clark's Marsh? So the groundwater modeling that was used to develop the extraction well profile for both of those treatment systems, those are done with groundwater modeling, which is a computer modeling program. That's not something that can necessarily be done easily by hand, if at all. To show the particle tracking that were shown in those figures, that is a computer-generated model. The plume maps that we show on the figures out here, those are drawn by hand. Those are not computer-generated. But let me say, there is a place for both methods, for computer-generated models plus professional interpretation and hand-drawn models. It's not one or the other. And I think we try to use the best of both worlds for that. If we're doing computer modeling to evaluate these treatment systems, that is a EPA accepted and approved and preferred method for doing a lot of this work. So I don't want folks to think that using computers to generate models for the work that we're doing here is not a good practice. It is. I think there is good in both, in manual interpretation as well as computer generated interpretation. But the plume maps you see here are hand drawn. They are not computer generated. The modeling for the treatment systems that you saw, the figures in the proposed plans with the particle tracking, those are computer generated models. And that's the best way to do that. So, Steve can add anything.
Great. Okay, well, let me just check in again to see if there are any further public comments from the members of the public who are here in person? Okay, and Darlene, I'll turn to you. It looks like there are some who have connected virtually who'd like to make a public comment. Which one do you see at the top of your list?
Kyle Jones.
Kyle Jones. Okay, so we will now turn to Kyle Jones. Mr. Jones, you have 3 minutes to make your comment, sir.
Hello, can you hear me okay, everyone?
Yes, sir, we can.
Okay, great. I'd like to first comment on Paula's comment that Paula just made. In my experience, hand-drawn and/or particular software that will draw plume maps based on data that's been acquired and analyzed, whereas models are very typically used for predicting future migration of contamination in groundwater. So if that's how the Air Force is going to use, then I think the community would be happy with that, but that wasn't clear from Paula's comments. So I'd ask you guys to look at that and be real clear with the community on precisely what method. I fully agree that computer modeling is a fully accepted method and been around for 40 years, but it's not used to draw current data that's known. Second point, I think that, consistent with the comments that have been going on throughout the entire meeting here, including Mr. Scaniola's comments, it's a little unclear, it's entirely unclear to the community why the Air Force is not sharing data with the community on a real-time basis or an ongoing basis. There's really no way for the community to understand where, geologically, or from an area point of view, where the groundwater sampling wells are, where the groundwater are, where the soil sampling locations are, and where the extraction wells for interim remedial actions are. Nor does the community have any of the historical data or the litany of data points that were taken from those files. That's really relevant to the community to have, to know, to be able to understand. So I think that the Air Force needs to very quickly adopt a process in which raw data collected can be transmitted to the community, obviously with any kind of caveat that it's not validated, hasn't gone through QA/QC, understood. But the raw data is fairly accurate, and it's pretty rare that validation process will change raw data being measured. Thirdly, I'd like to address the lack of specificity regarding the remedial investigation process, because there really has not been any discussion about rounds of sampling and the kind of analysis that the Air Force is doing in determining how to step out, in which direction, based on what information they're going to have in order to determine to step out. All we've heard is there is an RI underway, and it's entirely too vague and non-specific for the community to understand precisely what's going on in your work. I think that is also data and information that the community deserves to have, and there's no reason why the Air Force shouldn't share that data with the community.
All right, Mr. Jones, thank you for that comment. That was Kyle Jones. Kyle, let me just invite some of the others who are on the line and ready to make comments to make those comments. And if you'd like to stay on and make additional comments, you can certainly do that. Would that work for you, sir?
That's fine, absolutely fine.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your comment, Kyle Jones. Darlene, who's next on the list? Okay, so any other? All right, well, Kyle, you're next on the list. Kyle, would you like to make any additional comments, or did that time provide you?
I do have a couple, three more more comments?
Yeah, go ahead, 3 minutes, sir.
Then if I stop and no one has anything else, I get another.
You figured out our process.
So this is to Steve and for Sharon. There was comments made earlier about certain land areas for which Air Force students have legal access in order to do sampling. The Forest Service is another U.S. governmental agency, and it's a little beyond me to understand why there isn't some blanket access agreement that's been given to the Air Force for any sampling that needs to be done. But if there is a reason for not having such a blanket, can't there be a prediction by the Air Force of where you need to take samples as you are doing your RI and get the access agreement now, as opposed to figuring out and then waiting until you're ready to do the sampling before you start to get the access agreement? Is that something you can address?
So, question related to access agreements for Forest Service land. Steve, is there anything? Any other federal? Okay, any other federal lands? But Steve, anything that you'd like to share there?
I can't really address a blanket agreement between the agencies for access. That's way above my level. We did have an agreement with them. It did expire. In the process of renegotiating that, we ran into some roadblocks. We were able to work through those, and we do have an agreement with them for access. So we are ready to move forward.
Great. And let me just check in with Jesse Stunebeck. Jesse, anything that you'd like to add there as well?
What you said was accurate. We do have a access agreement in place for all activities related to the RI.
Okay. Thank you, Jesse. And Kyle, did that focus in on the question that you wanted to raise, sir?
Yeah, that was satisfactory response. Thank you.
Okay, great. So
next question. You mentioned that when someone asked about having sufficient financial resources, you said that wasn't a problem, but the alacrity with which the RI is moving forward was, you said, contract driven, and I don't understand that. And could you explain more what you need and what the Air Force is doing about alleviating the lack of alacrity of moving the RI forward because there are full contract issues?
Federal contracts have an expiration date, and when you reach that point, if you've got additional work, you have to have a new contract in place, and we've reached that situation, and we're working on a new contract.
Surely the Air Force can understand their timing for doing additional RI work prior to the expiration of a contract and start the contract acquisition process so that there is no delay whatsoever between contracts. Isn't that the case?
Typically, that would be the case. As someone pointed out on the schedule earlier, the RI is projected to go through November of next year now. We've had to do quite a bit more step out than was initially anticipated. The RI is continuing to grow in scope and duration. As Paula indicated, we are going to keep sampling until we've defined the extent of these plumes, but they're larger than anticipated.
And Kyle, I see that Mark Henry has a comment to make here. Kyle, let me just see if that addressed the question that you had.
I'd like to hear Mark, and then I'll continue if I have others.
All right, so let me turn to Mark Henry, and then I'm going to check to see if there are other public comments, and Kyle, then I might come back to you if there's no one else in line. Mark Henry, go ahead, sir.
The state regulatory agency, Eagle, had a town meeting last month, and I was surprised to hear in that meeting that the state has not been able to review any RI data during 2022. I was wondering what the Air Force can do to streamline the method at which it disseminates data so that the state agency can be kept in the loop almost as much as the federal contractors are. so that they can make decisions and have discussions in near real time, as opposed to being delayed by 8 or 9 months between rounds of sampling.
So the delay this year with sharing data with the regulators is predicated on the fiscal year 2022 National Defense Authorization Act. Section 345 includes a provision in there that restricts our ability to share data on private property. We are waiting for guidance from OSD, Office of Secretary of Defense, on how we can work around that to share data with both the regulators and with the community. But right now we are operating under that limitation.
All right, well, let me continue on with our public comment process. And let me just check first to see if we have anyone else here in person who would like to make a comment. I'll then move on to a few others who have raised their hand electronically. Bob Delaney, go ahead, sir.
I just want to clarify the map situation. Historically, we would get maps that were essentially created the data without any concern for direction of groundwater flow. I wasn't sure on this one. I thought it was hand-drawn, but I wasn't sure. So I was very happy to hear that you're doing them by hand and you got hydrogeologists.
All right, thank you very much, Bob. Anyone else here in person before we go to those who are on the line? Okay, Darlene, who do we have?
I think Sharon wanted to speak to something.
Okay, Sharon Versenga with the Air Force.
I didn't have my hand up. They may have heard me trying to add some data to what Steve was saying when he answered Mr. Henry's question. The Air Force does have an understanding with Eagle where we can share residential well location and ownership data with them because they're able to protect that under their law. So that flow has not stopped. Section 345A2 of the National Defense Authorization Act goes past that and also affects private business data. That is what we have not been able to share with Eagle is well location or well ownership data from private business land. So, but we can still give them the well results. So Eagle's getting virtually everything from us. The only thing we can't give them right now is if it's on private property that has a business on it. We can't tell them this is the location we were at, who owns that land. They're getting everything from residential, and they're getting the well results from the businesses. As Steve said, we are not allowed to release to the public the well location and well ownership for either residential or businesses. That's not just the National Defense Authorization Act, it also comes out of the Freedom of Information Act. So that's why the public gets the well sampling results themselves, and we try to show you on plumes where the different concentrations are without identifying anybody's personal property and giving away anything they have a privacy interest.
Thank you, Sharon. We appreciate that. Mr. Kline, anything that you'd like to add on this topic?
Yeah, I'm not sure if that comment was related to residential well sampling, which I don't think has been going on, but I'm not aware that we've been getting other data. At least what I've heard from my staff is that we haven't been getting data recently.
And that's correct. We have not, recently we have not shared data, but we're working on that.
All right, let me...
Just a real quick.
Iron of the Rich, go ahead, sir.
Does this situation violate your grant contract, this MOA, with the state regarding split samples or quality assurance samples at 10%?
The split samples that Eagle collects under DESMOA are their samples and their results, and they don't fall into this at all.
But you're telling us that you can't tell them, the state,
where the private property site is, so how can they take a sample?
No, we're saying that we can't provide them with the results and
Results.
private,
Okay.
and the private property owner location. So if we were to do split samples, which we have not done recently, they could come collect their sample. We cannot share the results necessarily, depending on the status of that property. Is it private residential, or as Sharon said, is it private business?
All right, let me continue this on. Go ahead, Sharon.
Able to give the actual well sample results. If they were there taking a split sample with us, they obviously know which land.
Exactly. Right. Correct. Okay. Thank you, Sharon. And let me just check in. Do we have other public comments online? Okay. All right. And let's see. Kyle Jones, did you have any additional comment that you would like to make, sir?
I do.
Okay.
So, is it a case, Steve, Paula, that the step-outs that are being taken based on round of sampling, are those being done based on an analysis of unvalidated, or are you waiting until you validate the data before determining the next step-out?
So we are doing step-outs based on preliminary data, and like you had mentioned in your previous comment, once the data is validated, usually it doesn't change very much, so we're pretty confident in our preliminary data for doing step-outs. We're doing vertical aquifer sampling, and we're taking that data as we get it, we evaluate it quickly so that we can then step out and try to get as much data as we can. So that's how we're doing the step-outs right now.
Okay, that's really great. Thank you for that.
And actually, Kyle, this is Tim Selton-Quist again. Let me just jump in. I see Mark Henry has, I think, a follow-up to that, and then Kyle, I'll come back your way. Go ahead, Mark.
Excuse me, Kyle. If you are making decisions using preliminary data, are you sharing that preliminary data with the state so that you can make the decisions in tandem?
We have in our UFP QAPR work plan, there is a decision logic that we use that drives our step outs. And it tells us, it's just a very simple decision logic. Whatever the data tells us, we make the decision based on whether it's above the screening criteria that we're using or below. It tells us how far to step out and in what direction to step out. So we have a decision logic that's already predetermined that allows us to do those step outs.
But you don't do it in consultation with the state?
We have not, no.
No.
And I'll let Steve, go ahead.
Having said that, the area down around Van Etten Creek and the other side of Van Etten Lake, our conceptual site model is not as well defined as it is in the Wordsmith proper area. So for the sampling we did around Van Etten Creek, we did actually involve Eagle. We provided them with the preliminary data. We proposed sample locations. We talked back and forth about it, made some adjustments to the next round of sampling. We've collected that, and we're waiting for the results to come back, and then we'll sit down with Eagle again and go through the same process.
Okay, so Kyle, did you have any additional public comments you'd like to make?
Yes, sir. I did.
Go ahead.
One that came to mind is that you were talking to Steve, is there some reason why you were not following that collaborative process with people for all data that the airport is taking?
I didn't hear the first part of that. Can you repeat it, please?
Sure. Steve has described the process in which the airport was sharing data and collaborating with people at Creek, because your conceptual site model is not as well defined. At least that's what I understood Steve to say. My question then is, why isn't the airport sharing all data and collaborating on all step-outs using the flat logic with Eagle for every piece of data that's taken in, not just selected areas?
Well, and like Steve had just mentioned before with the sharing of the data with Eagle, because we're collecting data on a daily basis and receiving data on a daily basis, making decisions as we go, because we're working through those providing data challenges with the NDAA. We've been trying to work through that, so that's one of the reasons we really haven't been as consistent about doing that as we were with Bennett and Cree, because the CSM was a little different down there and we wanted to engage them. So we're working through that to hopefully try to do better at that as we move forward.
Okay, I guess I heard Sharon tell us that there was no prohibition against sharing data with the agencies, whether federal, residential, or so. I don't know that there's any impediment to sharing data with people.
That's it. So outside of that,
Okay. If I could, let me just pull us into one conversation here real quick. Is there any follow-up from the interchange we've just had on that topic? Steve, anything that you'd like to add in? No. Or others? No? Okay, and so we'll go to Kathy Westerbarth first and to David Wynn. Kathy, your turn.
Kyle, I don't think that we got this from your call-in, but I'm wondering if you could identify yourself and explain your experience with the processes that we're going through.
Sure. Kyle Jones here. I'm a licensed attorney in Michigan. I've practiced environmental law for 32 years, both in-house at a Detroit law firm and private practice with Detroit law firm and in-house with Delphi Corporation, the spin-off of General Motors, and with Chrysler Stellantis. The last 15 years of my career, I retired in April this year, and I have a vacation home on Lake Huron in Greenbush, and have been coming to this area for 56 or 57 of my 63 years. And I have a real personal and professional interest in what's going on, and so I really want to help contribute to the success of the most efficient and productive environmental process that we have.
Great. Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you, Kyle.
Okay, and David Wynn, go ahead, sir.
Yeah. Steve, you mentioned earlier that you currently, and I think Dave Kline confirmed it, is that there's data that you guys haven't shared with Eagle yet, and you said you were going to do that. Is there any time frame, because I guess let's put a time frame on this. When do you guys believe you're going to be able to share the remaining data with Eagle as a collaborated effort?
We can share all the data we've got on private residential property by the end of the month.
I'm talking about all data, any data that Eagle needs.
Data for private commercial property, I'm waiting on guidance for how I can share that.
But what about stuff that's on the base?
Yeah, they have all that.
Dave, you confirm that?
I can not confirm, but I don't know. I have to check with staff.
Okay. So by the end of the month, any additional information Eagle can have.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Just a quick follow-up on that. There's about 6 of us next week who are going to be talking to the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense. Is there anything on this issue that you or Sharon can fill us in on? Is this across the board, all branches of the Department of Defense have this same issue about not sharing that data with their partners, either EPA or state environmental agencies?
This is Sharon Rosingo. As an OSD, why it's a federal law. The Freedom of Information Act and the NDAA, because they're federal laws, they apply to all federal agencies. Because EPA is subject to the same federal laws we are, the Department of Defense reached an agreement with them about data sharing. Because EPA was able to say, yes, we're bound by all the same laws you are, and he will agree that we will not publicly disclose the state agency that is it. Now, in the NDAA only applies to DOT, but Freedom of Information Act applies to all the federal agencies. With the Eagle, we already had an agreement before the NDAA ever came out that they looked at our laws, how we were constrained, and they said we can, under our laws, we can respect your constraints, and we agree that if you give us information that qualifies as personal privacy information under the Freedom of Information Act, we will protect the public exposure. So that only, Freedom of Information Act only applies to residential property. As we were talking about a few minutes ago, the National Defense Authorization Act talks about all private property, which includes private businesses. We don't have an agreement with Eagle that covers that situation. So actually, in Michigan, the state regulator is getting quite a bit more information, and we're able to give many state regulators across the country where they were not able to give us assurances that they would not publicly release the data. Some states are not allowed by their state laws to protect that data from release. And because of our obligations under federal law to protect privacy, we can't give it to the state. The state's not going to protect it publicly. So that is, you're going to find the same sort of thing across DOT. It's not just your force.
Sharon, let me jump in if I could. Sharon, thank you for that comment. We have a comment by Mark Henry. After that, I'll return us to the public comment portion, checking in with those who are here in person, seeing if there are others online before we begin to wrap up in about 7 minutes or so. Mark Henry, return.
Sure. I've heard Sharon talk about commercial property and not being able to disclose information about that. To the best of my knowledge, that in the area of concern of contamination, there are only 2 commercial properties. There's Cole's Cottages and there's the YMCA camp. That's it. So all of the other properties are either private, state-owned land, or township-owned land, or the airport owns it, or the Forest Service. So minus those 2 small properties, all of that other data should be shared with the state as it's generated, in my opinion.
Actually, if I could, let me just see if Steve Willis has any comment on that, and Mr. Maxwell, I'll then turn to you. Steve, any follow-up there?
Just to reiterate that by the end of the month, we'll provide all that data to Eagle.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Maxwell.
Are we talking about bulk data or individual data? You know, it doesn't make sense that bulk data from an area of what's been found there can't be disclosed. You know, you may not disclose individuals, an individual from an individual property, but things like bulk data from an area ought to be disclosed because there's no privacy involved.
You're absolutely right, and the bulk data is presented on the posters in the back of the room on the plume maps. The issue, as you indicate, is individual point sources in someone's yard. It's got to be protected.
Okay.
Mr. Maxwell, did that address the question that you had?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, good. Well, let me return us to our public comment portion of the agenda for the last few minutes of our meeting. Any other public comments from those who are here in person? And how about from those who are remote? Okay. And Mr. Jones? Mr. Jones, go ahead, sir. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Sharon and Steve, have you considered asking the businesses whether they would waive their privacy exceptions to the FOIA rule? Maybe they would like to have people have that data.
We have not done that yet.
Yeah, Steve said we have not done that yet. We're looking at starting to ask that question.
Okay, thank you. Dave Wynn and Mark Henry and they have gone through several other IRAs that the community suggests need to be done. is the Air Force going to consider those IRAs and communicate with the community about its evaluation?
Yes, we will look at all 4 of them, and we will provide feedback.
And Tim, one more, and then I'm done. We talked about the 5-year review. I totally agree the law says that the 5-year review is about final remedial action and ongoing monitoring thereafter. But that does not mean that the Air Force can't provide the community with a fulsome report on the effectiveness of IRA in any event. Would the Air Force consider providing reports on the current IRAs that are implemented and underway, as well as new ones that are going to be implemented and starting operation in the future?
Yeah, that's something I can look into.
Would you be able, Steve, to give us a response by the next RAB meeting?
Sure.
Sharon, I mean, Steve can look into that and see what the answer is going to be, but that is going to probably be an Air Force level decision, because it's not just a Wordsmith policy. You're talking about something that touches every installation, former installation the Air Force has.
That's the key. That's the key. That's right. Yep. That's why they hear about it now. Okay, Mr. Jones, thank you very much for your comments. Did you have any other comments, sir?
I am good for this meeting.
All right, sounds good. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Transparency should apply everywhere, not just at Wordsmith, and it would really help the whole country if you would put that into your operating plan.
Thank you, Mr. Gaines. Okay, any last public comments? Okay, well, that takes us through the public comment portion of the agenda that we have, takes us through all the elements of the agenda that we have. One thing, just to the RAB members, if you could please email me any action items that you would like to propose that the RAB co-chairs discuss in a couple of weeks. Please do that within a week if possible. I'll send out an email tomorrow requesting that. But again, anything that you feel is a possible action item, I'll consolidate those. We'll put those in front of the RAB co-chairs for their consideration when they meet in approximately 2 weeks or so. RAB co-chairs, does that work for you? Yeah. Yes. Well, great. Well, so we have made it through the agenda that we have for ourselves tonight. Let me turn to our co-chairs for closing remarks. Mr. Mark Henry, any closing remarks?
Just thank you for all who participated in this meeting. I look forward to the resolution of the issues that were raised this evening.
Thank you. Mr. Stephen Willis.
I echo Mark's appreciation for everyone that's participated. As I stated in my opening comments, I don't know if everyone on the line heard, but I encourage you to pre-register, and that way we can get you the meeting material prior to the meeting, and so you have benefit of the same package that all the RAB members here have.
All right, well, to the RAB members, to the members of the public, thank you very much for joining us tonight. We are adjourned this evening, and we will see you in a few months. Thank you. Thank you.
Great job, Grace.